Do you have a whole bunch of tracks at 95% completion and do you want to actually finish those tracks? Then today I may have the workflow for you that allows you to do that. Because we probably all know that feeling that you have a finished looking project, like for example this one over here, but there's just this one little idea that you don't like and this other little idea that needs a little bit of tweaking, and then it's going to be finished. And by the time when you finished implementing all of the changes that you wanted, you've heard a whole bunch of new things that you don't like, and then you start working on those. The question obviously is, how do you break out of a cycle like that? And to me personally, there's a few ways of doing that. For one, I really like just having a finished track in my project. So one of the things that I like to do in order to gauge how close I am to a finished project is immediately start worrying about the whole song when I start writing. I know a lot of people that like to start working in either loops or just a very small portion of the track that they then expand into a full track. I like working the other way around, where I immediately get a full structure and then try to fill in the structure as it needs more sounds. And then once I find that the structure is full, that is when I would consider a track finished. Of course, you can see that by having sequences everywhere, we have one-shots everywhere, we're going to have effects everywhere. We see that we have a nice amount of vocals throughout the track. So you can kind of just see it in the way that the project is structured, as well as how much of that structure is actually filled in. And this is the point where I start to work on those details of the track that allows me to get ever closer to actually getting the track finished. Because when we are in that state where we're constantly looking at the details and constantly making smaller and smaller tweaks without actually calling the track finished, we are at that point actually making progress in our production. Because it's false to believe that in that point of time, you're not actually making the track better. When you're in that cycle of like, oh, I need to fix this, I need to fix this, I need to make that one small detail a little bit better and then my track will be finished. If you're in a cycle like that, you are actually improving the track. The thing that gets you out of a cycle like that is at some point you have to ask yourself, the details that you're changing, do they really matter? There's this really cool saying that you can use here to really convince yourself of just the gravity of the changes that you're making. And that is asking yourself the question, if I didn't make this change, would people like actively walk off the dance floor when they hear this part of the track? No, I don't think they would. And therefore, once you understand this idea that people aren't going to leave the dance floor or they aren't going to care less for your music if you don't work out all of the details that you have in mind, that is not too big of a problem. At the end of the day, you want to put out something because you like to share that with the world. So you need to actually finish some stuff that you can share with the world. And there's always going to be a moment that right when you shared something, you think of a new line for a vocal line that you would like to use. You think of a new mixing trick that you could have applied in that one situation that just doesn't sound right in the track right now. All of those things are now new experiences and are you learning. The cool thing about actually finishing your music is that one, you learn how to finish music, because that is very, very important, of course. And two, you have this milestone now that you can look back onto in a few years to say like, I've actually improved this much in my music production. Like right now, I'm currently working on my second album and I'm trying to finish off all of the projects of the album. I'm hoping to actually get that done within this month in terms of the whole production. And then in November, I'm going to start mixing. And then towards December, I can start to think about how to actually release it, doing all of the visuals and all of the extra work that goes with releasing. And I hope that that means that we'll soon have another projector album that I can then start to compare to the first album to actually see the improvements that I've had over that amount of time. And the cool thing is, I still remember when I put out the first album and when I thought like, oh, this music is so good. This music is sounding so nice. This is the best of what I can do. And even now, listening to the old album, when I compare that with the new productions that I have in mind now, I cannot actually believe that I believed that back then. And I'm sure there's going to be a moment that I think about the tracks that I'm working on now in the exact same way. Now, all of that sounds very, very good, but how do you actually get to then a final track? How do you actually do it? One of the things that I've noticed is that I'd like to make decisions outside of the DAW. So when you're sitting here in a project, it is really nice to say like, oh, there's so many tracks that I could edit. There's so many individual sounds that I could play with that I can make ever so slightly better. And that is something that, of course, you could do. But what I've been doing for the last month now is every time right before I go to bed, I listen to one or two of the tracks that I want to make improvements to, and then I just WhatsApp myself the improvements that I want to make. The cool thing about WhatsApp is that you can just message yourself and it will just show up like this as one big list. And now I can go through that list for every project that I'm working on. This is the projects that we're looking at now over here. And I can actually just have WhatsApp open on a second monitor and actually implement all of the things that I've previously noted down. And what tends to happen is throughout that process, I'll find one or two more things that I want to change. And then at the end, I have like a complete session where I can say, okay, I've made all of the changes that I said I wanted to make. This means that this chapter is done. And truth be told, I do that like 2-3 times for every track. Of course, you don't catch everything in the first time around, and maybe the changes that you're implementing aren't quite what you want. So there's always a little bit of a grace period where you can just let the track fade a little bit into your memory, and then after a few days you listen to it again and see if there's any new changes that need to be made. But at some point you're just going to have to say like, okay, this is going to be the final check that I do, and after that I won't make any more changes to this track. Now for most people, towards the end of their production stage, there's going to be the mixing and mastering stage. But for me, it isn't really towards the end of the production stage. For those that have been following me for a little bit longer on this channel, they will know that I mix in a different DAW. What I do is I export each individual sound, each individual track that you see over here. And then I re-import that into a Reaper project so that I can actually mix and master the song in there. And there's a really good reason why you would do that with regards to finishing tracks quickly, because it does actually help you, finalize ideas. You have to commit something to audio, you have to render it out of the DAW, it is harder to edit, it is harder to go back and actually change the idea. And it allows for a whole bunch of other benefits, mainly that I get to rebalance the whole mix by re-importing it into a new project. And of course, that is a little bit more extra work in the sense that you have to basically render everything out, which takes a good chunk of time. Usually what I end up doing is I just leave a project like that rendering overnight. But then of course the actual setup of the new project and all of that stuff also takes a lot of time. And it would be much easier to just go into the project over here and do your mixing the way that you would normally do that. But I found that not being able to go into individual, kicks and make whatever change that you want, going into individual synths and making any change that you want. I can literally go in here and change the synth patch that it's using. If you don't have that ability, it is a little bit harder for you to get to that step where you're just making changes to the track again. You can imagine that for me, there's a really clear stop of the production. I render everything out to audio, and then from that moment on, I'm just focusing on the mix. I'm no longer focusing on the ideas that are in the track. Do I want to change the vocal that is in here? Do I want to change the pattern of the kick and bass? All of that kind of stuff is no longer important for me. I'm just focusing on taking the ideas that I have right now and making sure that they work together in a mixing sense and then mastering the track. So for me, every project has a really clear midpoint, in that after the midpoint, I no longer worry about the ideas of the track. And even when it comes to finishing off the details, what ends up happening is that the first few times that I send my ideas into WhatsApp, it is usually like, oh, there's a sound missing over here. That sound needs to be a completely different sound. That sound over there needs to be, an octave higher. Those kind of bigger changes. But towards the end, it's really about the details of the sound. Like this frequency shifter needs to go up a little bit faster. This EQ high pass that I have over here coming in needs to take a little bit longer to come in over time. Stuff like that where I'm not necessarily even adding new sounds into the project. In fact, all of the corrections that I have to make in this production over here that I've been using for this video and that I'm going to make right after this recording, all of the changes that I'm going to make are going to involve the sounds that are already in this project. So even in the production, you're just kind of naturally, gradually working towards a moment in time where you're no longer questioning the ideas of the track. It's just that for me personally, there's also this hard stop in which I have to say okay, this project is going to mixing. I can no longer worry about the idea. And honestly, personally, I think that that is one of the biggest things that I've done for my own finishing tracks workflow. I think that it's really important to be able to say, stop, now this is enough. And that is of course a skill that you have to develop. One of the other things that is very, very important is that you don't burn out on these kind of projects. And that is the reason why I like having multiple projects to work on. Right now, as I said, I'm working on a full album, but I also have some other singles that are in the works. So I would say that I'm roughly around 12, 13 active tracks that I'm currently working on. The cool thing about that is I can just hop on from project to project. And whenever I'm in the stage where, okay, this track is finished, I need to do the details. Once I have inspiration to actually finish the track and do the details, I can focus on that. And if I don't have that, then I also have a project that isn't as close to actually being finished. And I can spend some more time actually working on ideas. At that point in time, it depends a little bit on what my creativity actually wants me to work on. But you can imagine that having a system in place that allows you to work on multiple different projects is very nice, because you don't always have to look up to the task of actually finishing a track and delivering a final rendered version of your project. So that's going to be it. That's going to be the tips that I want to talk about today. If you have another tip that you use to finish tracks quickly that I haven't covered, then make sure that you let me know in the comments down below. Because of course, as I'm working on an album, I can also use some tips in order to improve that. But for now, this is going to be where the video is going to end. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you did by leaving a like and making sure that you're subscribed. Another way that you can support the channel is by becoming one of my patrons. That is why my Patreon page is linked for you up on the end cards, together with 2 more of my videos, which you can click to continue watching. So thank you for watching this video. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.